It was a chilly Saturday, and the sky was getting darker with clouds that promised rain later that evening. But my best friend and I were too excited to let that stop us from going to see our favorite country singer. We had made the trip up from Fargo to the Dauphin Country Fest, a big music festival held every July in rural Manitoba, Canada. This festival brings people from all over the country to this small town. They come to enjoy country music, camp out, and have fun away from everyday life. The festival is set up on a hill surrounded by deep woods and wide open farmlands. As it gets dark, these woods and fields around the hill turn into shadowy places, giving the festival an eerie feel. The hill itself fills up with tents and campers, turning into a lively spot where music fans of all ages come together. At the Country Fest, the air smells like pine trees and campfires, and you can hear guitars and banjos playing. People are laughing, eating, and drinking, and singing along with the music. It's a place where you forget your worries and just enjoy the moment with music and friends. But that night, as we walked among the happy crowds, lit by the stage lights and fires, and not at all bothered by the occasional spurts of rain, I didn't know that things were about to change. My friend ran into a couple of guys she met at a group skiing trip in Vancouver the year before. Since I had to go to the toilet, I left her to chat and catch up while I braved the long line at the washrooms, and we arranged to meet up at the same spot in 15 minutes. When I came out of the washrooms, I could not find my friend or the two guys she was talking to anywhere. Not sure what to do, I decided I would just find a spot to enjoy the final act, and then head to where we parked the car when the show was over. Surely she would find me there. As the final notes of the last performance lingered in the air, I started making my way through the bustling crowd, eager to beat the rush out. But I quickly noticed something unsettling. A man I had bumped into earlier, the one with the uneasy smile, seemed to be everywhere I turned. At first I thought it was just a coincidence with so many people around, but it soon became clear that it wasn't. The crowd thinned a bit as I moved toward the exits, and that's when I felt a prickling sensation on the back of my neck. Every time I glanced back, there he was, a few steps behind me, matching my pace. His presence loomed larger with each step I took, and I could feel my heart beating faster and faster. I tried to tell myself to stay calm, that maybe he was just heading the same way, but he kept staring directly at me. Wanting to handle the situation calmly, I stopped and turned to confront him. "Can I help you with something? Are you lost?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He just smiled, a cryptic, unsettling smile, and said nothing. Then, without another word, he continued following me. My attempts to defuse the situation had failed, and now his intentions felt undeniably sinister. My stomach churned with anxiety as I realized I needed to find a way out of this quickly. In a desperate bid to shake him off, I ducked into a dense group of people heading toward the parking area, weaving through them, hoping to blend in. But when I dared to glance back, my heart sank. He had paused, watching from a distance, and then continued to follow, undeterred by the crowd. Picking up my pace, I tried another tactic. My wrist was adorned with a flashing festival bracelet, bright and noticeable. I began tapping it frantically, turning it into a distress signal, hoping against hope that someone would notice the urgency in the flashing lights and my quick, nervous movements. The festival grounds started to empty, and the areas became less crowded. That's when he saw his chance. He quickened his steps and came closer, pretending to ask for directions. "Hey, could you help me find the exit?" he called out, his voice feigning confusion. The question was a clear ploy to stop me, to isolate me from the thinning crowd. My heart raced with fear, and I knew I couldn't let him catch up. Realizing the danger was too close, I turned and saw a family group nearby, a couple with young kids, laughing and walking together. Without hesitating, I sprinted towards them, my breath heavy, my mind racing with panic. I hoped that the presence of children would deter him from doing anything in front of witnesses. As I reached the family, I didn't stop to explain fully. I just merged into their group, glancing back to see his reaction. As I reached the family, I quickly blurted out, I think someone is following me." The parents immediately understood the urgency in my voice. The father stepped closer to me while the mother pulled her kids a bit tighter to her side. They formed a protective circle around me as we walked towards the well-lit main exit of the festival. I kept glancing back nervously, and I could see him, the stalker, hesitating as he watched us move. The presence of the family, their protective stance, and the bright lights from the exit seemed to make him think twice. After a moment that felt like forever, he turned around and melted back into the shadows of the night, disappearing from view. I was so relieved as we reached the safety of the exit, I thought I was going to throw up. The lights of the parking lot felt like a beacon of safety, and the family stayed with me, ensuring I felt secure. The threat was gone, and I was safe, thanks to the kindness and quick action of strangers who had become my unexpected guardians. Once we were safely out of the festival grounds, the kind family stayed with me until my friend arrived. Standing there, I felt a huge mix of relief and fright. I was so thankful for the strangers who helped me, showing me how kind people can be. This scary night taught me to always stay alert, even in places that seem safe and fun. I decided that from now on, I'll always have a plan to quickly get in touch with my friends or security whenever I go to big events like this. It was a night I'll never forget, and it changed how I think about staying safe. I always thought sharing my life online was safe, just a fun way to connect and share beauty tips and daily adventures from my apartment here in the heart of a busy city. My name is Jenna, and being a social media influencer was my dream job, until it turned into a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. It all started with a few strange comments on my posts. At first, I brushed them off as typical internet trolls, but then things escalated in ways I never imagined. What began as simple interactions soon spiraled into a horrifying experience that showed me the dark side of being in the public eye. At first, the comments on my social media posts seemed like the usual online noise. Some were mean, others just weird, but I didn't think much of it. That's just the internet, right? But then, the comments started getting specific, really specific. They mentioned the cafe I had visited that morning or the color of the dress I had just bought. Details I hadn't even posted about. Things got scarier quickly. One night as I was cooking dinner, my phone pinged with a message from an unknown number. "I like the pasta you're making," it read. I froze. My curtains were drawn, and I hadn't shared anything about my dinner plans. How could anyone know? That's when it hit me. Someone was watching me closely, maybe even from somewhere near my apartment. The worst part came a few days later. I found a small package right outside my door. No return address, just a plain brown box. Inside was a USB drive. Curiosity overpowered my fear for a moment, and I plugged it into my computer. What I saw made my heart stop. A video montage of my recent activities, all taken from a distance but clear enough to see it was me. Walking my dog, laughing with friends, coming and going from my apartment. The footage was accompanied by a note that simply stated, "I'm always watching you." The realization that someone had been following me, documenting my movements, was utterly terrifying. During one of my regular evening live streams, where I was sharing some makeup tips, I noticed a sudden flash from outside my window. It startled me, and for a moment, I froze, brush in hand. Turning slowly towards the window, my heart dropped as I saw a shadowy figure with a camera lurking in the bushes across from my apartment. I quickly pretended everything was fine, ended the stream, and locked myself in my bedroom, shaking uncontrollably. The situation only got worse from there. Soon after, I started receiving chilling messages from the stalker. They weren't just watching anymore. Now, they were threatening to come inside. One message read, "See you soon, Jenna. Can't wait to meet in person." Terrified, I upgraded my home security system and posted a message to my followers, sharing a blurred image of the figure and asking if anyone recognized them. The community response was overwhelming, but no one could identify the stalker. A few days later, during another live session, this time trying to reassure my viewers, and myself, that everything was under control. My doorbell began to ring incessantly. I tried to ignore it and continue with the live stream, but then loud bangs erupted from my back door. My viewers could hear everything, and the fear in my voice was unmistakable. I whispered that someone was trying to break in, and hundreds of comments flooded in, urging me to call the police. The climax of this nightmare came when I received an email during the live session. The sender was, once again, my stalker. With my heart in my throat, I clicked the link in the email, only to be directed to a website displaying live footage of the inside and outside of my apartment. Cameras had been secretly installed everywhere, in my living room, my hallway, even pointing at my front door from the outside. It was clear then that this person hadn't just been watching me online. They had invaded every part of my life, monitoring my every move from both near and far. The realization that I was never alone, that every moment of my supposed privacy had been watched, left me feeling helpless and terrified. I knew I had to act fast to protect myself and end this invasion once and for all. When I realized I was in real danger during the live session, my followers immediately sprang into action. People from all over were commenting, trying to help. Some of them were tech-savvy and started to piece together clues from my videos and the stalker's messages. They managed to capture screenshots from the live stream and even traced the IP address of the email link to a location near my apartment. One of my followers called the police and provided them with all the digital evidence we had collected together. The support of my online community was incredible. Without them, I don't know how I would have handled everything. After all that happened, the police tried their best, but the stalker got away. They couldn't find him, even with all the clues and help from my followers. This left me feeling really unsure and scared because I didn't know if or when he might try to come back. Because of this, I had to think hard about how I share my life online. I decided to be much more careful about what I post, keeping my personal details private. It was a big change because sharing was such a big part of my life, but feeling safe was more important. This whole scary experience showed me how vulnerable we can be online, and it made me want to help others learn about online safety. Even though the stalker wasn't caught, the support from my community gave me strength. It's tough not knowing if the danger is really over, but I've learned how to be stronger and smarter about protecting myself. Now, I focus on helping others feel safer too. A few months ago, I was alone in the university library at midnight, and it was a night I'll never forget. My name is Sarah, and I'm a graduate student in history. I like to study parts of history that most people forget about, which is why I was in the library so late. That night, I was doing research for my thesis on the history of our college. The library is really big and has lots of shelves full of books. It's usually a bit dark, and that night it was only lit by some small lights that didn't reach the dark corners. I had special permission to be there after hours, which felt great because I could access all the records and files I needed. But as the night went on, the quiet and big, shadowy library started to make me feel nervous. I didn't know it then, but my interest in the past was about to lead me into a very scary situation. As I flipped through the old files and newspaper clippings, I came across something that made me stop cold. There were reports of students who had disappeared decades ago, all from right here on campus. The most chilling part was that each of them was last seen near this very library. My hands felt a bit shaky as I read the details. It was unsettling to think about such mysteries in the quiet of the night. As I continued to read, I started hearing odd noises. First, it was faint footsteps, like someone trying to move silently through the stacks. Then, a book thudded to the floor in the next aisle over. I peeked around the corner, but there was no one there. I told myself I was just tired and hearing things, but a small voice in my head whispered that something wasn't right. Deciding it was best to pack up and leave, I began to gather the files I needed to take home. That's when I saw it, a shadowy figure in the corner of my eye. It was watching me from a dark corner of the library. Every time I tried to look directly at it, it seemed to vanish. My heart started to race, and a cold sweat broke out across my forehead. I knew I couldn't stay here any longer. Grabbing my things, I hurried to leave, feeling the weight of the figure's gaze on my back as I moved as quickly as I could toward the exit. I quickly shoved the files into my bag, my hands trembling as I felt the figure drawing nearer. With every second, my fear grew, and I knew I had to get out of there fast. Using my knowledge of the library's layout, I darted down less traveled corridors, hoping to confuse whoever was following me. As I neared the exit, the quiet was shattered by the sound of rapid footsteps echoing behind me. I glanced back and saw a shadow darting between the bookshelves. My heart pounded in my chest as I pushed my legs to move faster, bursting through the library doors into the cool night air. Outside, I didn't stop. I ran toward the campus's underground walkway, thinking it might be a shortcut to safety. But the footsteps followed, persistent and quickening. As I entered the dimly lit tunnel, my worst fears were realized. The stalker had followed me outside and into the walkway. Suddenly, he was right behind me. I could almost feel his breath on my neck. In a moment of sheer panic, I tried to sprint, but he grabbed my arm, spinning me around to face him. My heart raced as I struggled against his grip. Just as I felt I couldn't get away, loud voices and laughter echoed through the tunnel. A group of drunk students stumbled into the walkway, playing some loud game. Startled by the noise and the sudden appearance of others, the stalker let go of me and slipped into the shadows, disappearing as quickly as he had appeared. Breathing heavily, I leaned against the tunnel wall, my knees weak with relief. The students, oblivious to how they had just saved me, continued their noisy banter, heading toward the party. I knew I had to get out of there and find safety. The group of students noticed how scared I was as I stumbled out of the dark tunnel. They quickly came over to help me, asking if I was okay and what had happened. I managed to explain through shaky breaths that someone had chased me. One of them pulled out a phone and dialed campus security right away, while another kept asking if I needed water or to sit down. It didn't take long for campus security to arrive, and the local police followed soon after. I gave them a full statement about what had happened, describing the stalker as best as I could in the blur of fear. I also handed over the old files I had found in the library. The officers were particularly interested in these documents, saying they might be crucial in understanding the historical disappearances and possibly identifying who had followed me. In the days that followed, the library took immediate action to increase its security during the night. More lights were installed, and security cameras were added to ensure that everyone felt safe while studying or researching. The investigation led by the police eventually identified the stalker as a local resident who had become obsessed with the old cases of disappearances. He believed he was part of a historical pattern and was trying to reenact the mysteries. Reflecting on that night, I realized how my love for digging into the past had almost put me into a chapter of history marked by fear and danger. While I remained passionate about uncovering hidden stories, I learned the importance of being more cautious and aware of my surroundings, especially when alone. The experience left me with a deep respect for the unpredictability of the past and its power to affect the present. It reinforced my desire to uncover and share these stories, but now with a commitment to do so more safely, always mindful of the shadows that history can cast. I often travel alone for my job to meet clients and friends. As a freelance graphic designer, these road trips are a great way for me to find new ideas for my artwork. It was one of those nights, around 11:30 p.m., when I found myself pulling into a rest stop after driving for hours. This wasn't just any rest stop. It was pretty isolated, surrounded by thick, dark woods, and only a few dim lights flickered above me. The small shop that usually welcomed travelers was closed, its windows dark. But the old, run-down washroom was open for anyone desperate enough to use it. As I parked my car, I couldn't help but notice the other vehicles around. They were empty and covered with a layer of dust and leaves, as if no one had moved them for days. As I stepped out of my car, hit by the cool air, I suddenly felt uneasy by just how quiet this place was. I stretched my legs and took a deep breath, telling myself I just needed to focus on going to the washroom and getting right back on the road. I locked my car and headed towards the washroom. It was not very inviting. The light inside was weak and flickering. The walls were dirty all along the floor, and the smell made you want to hold your breath. As I entered, I thought I heard whispers. They were soft and hard to make out, coming from one of the stalls. I paused, listening, but the whispers stopped as quickly as they had started. Curious and a bit worried, I pushed the stall door open, but it was empty. Just as I was about to leave, a shadow darted past the window outside. Startled, I jumped to hide myself. Someone was definitely out there. Feeling a rush of nervousness, I hurried back to my car. I tried unlocking it with my key fob, but it didn't work on the first try, which was unusual. After a couple of tries, it set off the alarm. I managed to get the alarm to stop, but it was clear someone must have messed with the door locks for my key fob to not work. My hands felt shaky, and I looked around, suddenly very aware of how isolated I was. Who else could be lurking around this nearly abandoned rest stop? And why? What do they want? Just before I reached my car, through the passenger window, I saw a figure duck down on the other side of my car. I knew I was in trouble. Instead of getting into my car, I turned around and hurried back towards the building, hoping to find a safer place to think and maybe a way to call for help. Once inside the washroom again, the sense of danger became real. I could hear the crunching of gravel under heavy boots around the outside, like someone pacing, circling the building. I tiptoed over to one of the windows and peeked out. There, under the flickering light of an overhead lamp, I caught glimpses of a figure moving secretively. Each time the light flickered on, the figure was closer to the building than before. Suddenly, a rock smashed against the window I was looking through. Spider webs spread across the glass. I ducked instantly and crawled on my hands and knees into a storage space behind the washroom to hide. The room was dusty and filled with old, forgotten supplies. As I huddled behind a stack of boxes, I heard the terrifying sound of the door handles being tried. Then, one of the doors creaked open. He had found an unlocked door. My breathing stopped for a moment. In the dim light of the storage room, I noticed a pile of old, dusty mirrors leaning against the wall. Desperate, I grabbed a couple and angled them towards the window, trying to catch the light from the street lamp outside. I moved the mirrors back and forth, sending flashes of light out towards the highway, praying that someone would see the signals and stop. Each second felt like an eternity, as I listened to the soft footsteps of the stalker moving closer within the building, all while I kept moving the mirrors, hoping for a miracle. Just when I felt like my arms couldn't wave the mirrors any longer, the rumble of a large truck pulling into the rest stop reached my ears. The flashing lights must have worked. The sound of the truck's engine was the most wonderful noise I had heard all night. As the truck came closer, I heard the crunching of gravel stop suddenly. The stalker must have heard it too, because the footsteps that had been creeping closer through the building suddenly turned and hurried away. I peeked out from behind the boxes and saw the truck's headlights sweeping across the front of the building. The door of the truck opened, and a big, tall man stepped out. He called out in a deep, loud voice, "Is anyone here? Do you need help?" His voice echoed through the empty rest stop, scaring away the silence and fear that had filled it just moments ago. I stepped out from my hiding spot and called back, "Yes, I'm here. Please, I need help." I walked towards him, my legs shaky but grateful to be moving towards safety and away from danger. The truck driver was kind and concerned. He listened as I quickly explained what had happened. Seeing how shaken I was, he offered to drive me to the nearest town where I could be safe and call the police. As we drove away from that scary rest stop, I felt an enormous weight lift off my shoulders. I was safe, thanks to the brave truck driver who had seen my signal and stopped to help. As we drove to the nearest town, the truck driver called the police about the scary incident at the rest stop. Sitting there, I felt safe but also a bit scared about what had happened. I decided I'd be more careful from now on, especially when traveling alone. This scary moment taught me to be stronger and smarter. I knew I'd keep traveling for my job, but I'd make sure to always stay safe. This experience wasn't going to stop me. It just made me more prepared for my future trips. My name is Sarah Jennings, and I work as a bank teller at a busy city bank branch. Not too long ago, I moved here from a much quieter neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. I've always enjoyed the energy and constant buzz of downtown city life, but I've never let go of the caution I grew up with back home. Late autumn in the city wraps everything in a chilly breeze, and the days get dark pretty early, which adds a bit of a gloomy feel to the evenings. One of the things I liked about moving to the city was the idea of meeting new people and leaving behind some of the old faces from my suburban hometown. But there was one person from back home I couldn't seem to shake off: Joe. He used to run the garage store in my old neighborhood and was a regular at the small bank branch where I worked. I remembered him because he always made me feel a bit uneasy, though I couldn't quite put my finger on why at the time. Since I started working at this new branch, Joe started showing up here too. Every day, without fail, he'd come in to make tiny deposits or ask for change. It was odd because there was no logical reason for him to be here in the city, especially so far from his garage store. Yet, there he was, always insisting that I be the one to help him. His presence became more and more unsettling, and I felt the tension building every time he walked through the door. Joe's transactions weren't just small, they were unnecessary, like he was looking for excuses to come in. What made it even more uncomfortable was how he'd act overly familiar with me, always trying to chat about personal things or asking about my family back in our old neighborhood, as if he had a right to know. I tried to tell myself he was just being friendly in his own way, but things got weirder. I started noticing him during my lunch breaks. He would be across the street, just standing there, watching me as I walked to the nearby cafe or sat on a park bench. It felt like he was always there, blending into the background, his eyes following my every move. Then one day, things took a turn that really unnerved me. I reached into my purse to grab my wallet, and my fingers brushed against something unexpected. It was a small, worn-out toy, a little wooden horse that I recognized instantly. It was my favorite toy as a child, one I hadn't seen in years since I lost it back in my hometown. How it ended up in my purse was a mystery that seriously freaked me out. The only person I could think of who knew so much about my past was Joe. Just when I thought it couldn't get any creepier, I arrived at work one morning to find a bouquet of flowers waiting for me at my teller station. Attached to it was a note from Joe. It read, "To the one who understands me." I felt cold from discomfort. While my co-workers cooed over the romantic gesture, I felt more isolated than ever. They couldn't see the sinister side of Joe's attention that I felt looming over me, making each day harder to face than the last. It was a cold, dark evening when I was working late at the bank. Most of my co-workers had already left, and the usual hustle of the city seemed quieter outside. As I locked up my station and headed towards the exit, a nagging feeling told me to glance through the window before stepping out. That's when I saw him. Joe was there in the parking lot, leaning against my car, as if he had been waiting for me for a while. I became instantly aware of my heart beating super hard and fast, but I knew I had to walk out eventually. Gathering all the courage I had, I stepped into the cool night air. Joe straightened up as he saw me, a strange smile playing on his lips. "Sarah, we need to talk about our connection," he called out, his voice eerily calm. "We have a shared path that you need to see." I wanted to run right then, but he was blocking my path to the bus stop. Reluctantly, I stopped a few feet away from him, demanding, "What do you mean, Joe?" He reached into his coat and pulled out an old, battered box. Opening it, he revealed a collection of items from my childhood. Photographs of me playing in my old backyard, my long-lost wooden horse, and letters I wrote to imaginary friends. "See, these things brought us together. They're signs of our destiny," he said, his eyes gleaming with a disturbing intensity. I felt an ice-cold chill down my spine. "Joe, you need to leave me alone. This isn't normal or right," I stammered, backing away. But he stepped forward, his hand reaching out as if to grab me. "You can't leave now. You know the truth." I turned and ran towards the bank's entrance, hearing his footsteps pounding on the pavement behind me. He shouted, Sarah, don't make me come for you. I reached the bank door, fumbling with my keys, hands shaking uncontrollably. Just as Joe was almost upon me, I managed to unlock the door and hurl myself inside, slamming it shut and locking it immediately. I leaned against the door, gasping for breath, as Joe reached the other side. He began to bang on the glass furiously, yelling for me to come out. His face pressed against the glass, his expression twisted into one of obsession and anger. I stumbled back, heart pounding in my ears, and dialed the police with trembling fingers. All I could do was watch as he continued to pound on the door, his shouts muffled by the thick glass. As I leaned against the bank door, watching Joe bang on the glass, I quickly called the police on my phone. My voice shook as I explained to the dispatcher what was happening. They told me to stay calm and that officers were on their way. I crouched below the windows, out of Joe's sight, my heart pounding so hard it echoed in my ears. Within minutes, which felt like hours to me, I heard the distant sirens growing louder. The sound made Joe pause, and he looked around, a confused and scared expression replacing his anger. As the police cars pulled into the parking lot, their lights flashing brightly in the dark, Joe took a few steps back from the door. The officers approached him cautiously, and I watched from inside as they handcuffed him. They led him away from the bank, and one officer came to check on me. I unlocked the door, still shaking, and explained everything that had happened. The relief of seeing them and knowing I was safe was overwhelming. I almost couldn't believe that it was finally over. Later, I learned that the police had searched Joe's car and found it filled with surveillance equipment, cameras, binoculars, and a detailed journal he had kept. The journal was filled with notes about my routines, movements, and even conversations he had overheard. It was clear from the evidence that Joe had been planning to abduct me, watching and waiting for the perfect moment. Knowing how close I had come to real danger, I felt a deep sense of relief wash over me. The police assured me that Joe would face serious charges, and that I wouldn't have to worry about him again. As I sat in the back of the police car, giving my statement, the fear began to drain away, replaced by a profound gratitude for the quick response of the police and the end of this terrifying ordeal. A few months ago, right after we won the big championship game, something happened that I'll probably never forget. My name is Damien, and it was my first year at a new university. I was on the football team, but I wasn't one of the top players yet. I was still trying to fit in, you know. I'm kind of a big guy, which is good for football, but I get pretty nervous in new places. That night, we all went to this popular bar near campus to celebrate our win. The place was packed with students, loud music, and banners of our team colors everywhere. Everyone was having a great time, cheering and shouting, but I felt a bit on edge, trying to keep to myself and take it all in. Little did I know, the night was about to turn into something way wilder than my worst fears. As I leaned against the bar, sipping my soda, I couldn't help but notice Tyler staring at me. Tyler was one of the star players on our team, and everyone knew he had a quick temper. But tonight, his eyes were locked on me with such intensity that it made my stomach churn. I tried to figure out why, and then I saw her, Jess, Tyler's ex-girlfriend. She was laughing at something I had said a few minutes earlier. Suddenly, Tyler stormed over. The music was booming, and people were dancing, but it felt like everything went quiet around me. "What do you think you're doing talking to Jess like that?" Tyler growled at me. His face was red, and his hands were balled into fists. People started to notice, and a small crowd began to form around us. "Hey man, it's nothing like that," I tried to explain, but Tyler wasn't listening. He stepped closer, and some of our teammates hurried over trying to calm him down, but Tyler just shoved them away, yelling, "Stay out of this!" Just then, I overheard something that made me realize I should take this situation seriously and tread carefully. A couple of teammates were whispering nearby, "Tyler's been way off lately. Worse than ever. You think it's the steroids?" The other nodded. "Definitely. He's been using them like crazy." Hearing that, I knew this wasn't just any ordinary jealous rage. Tyler was unpredictable and possibly dangerous. I glanced around, hoping for an easy way out, but Tyler's glare kept me frozen in place. The festive noise of the bar seemed to fade into the background as I braced myself for what might come next. Things escalated faster than I could have imagined. One of our teammates, Mark, stepped in, trying to put some sense into Tyler, telling him to cool off. But Tyler wasn't himself. With a wild look in his eyes, he swung hard, hitting Mark right in the face. Mark fell to the ground, and the whole bar gasped. That moment, it became clear that Tyler was out of control, and it was dangerous to be near him. The bar erupted into chaos. Tyler, fueled by his rage, started swinging at anyone close enough. People screamed and scrambled to get out of the way. Glasses shattered, and chairs were knocked over as the celebration turned into a nightmare. I tried to help a few others to get to safety, dodging punches and flying debris, feeling my heart pounding in my chest. Seeing the terror in everyone's eyes and knowing it could get worse, I did something that might have been crazy. I shouted over the noise, "Tyler, let's take this outside." Surprisingly, he paused, then nodded, storming out the back door. I followed, hoping maybe I could calm him down or at least keep him from hurting anyone else. Outside, the cool night air did nothing to chill Tyler's fury. As soon as we were out of the bar, he turned on me. I tried to defend myself, but Tyler was too strong and too angry. His punches were fast and hard, knocking the wind out of me. I took a beating, feeling each blow as I desperately hoped for it to end. Just when I thought I couldn't take much more, the bouncers from the bar came rushing out. Someone had sprinted out the front to get them, and they arrived just in time, pulling Tyler off me and pinning him to the ground. Their strong arms and quick action kept him down, holding him until the police could take over. I could hear sirens in the distance. Some of the students must have called the cops when the fight started inside. I just needed to hold on a little longer. Finally, I saw the flashing lights approach, and relief washed over me. The police arrived, and as they tackled Tyler to the ground, I collapsed, exhausted and bruised, but thankful it was over. My teammates rushed over to help me up, their faces filled with worry and relief. The nightmare was finally over, thanks to the quick action of those who dared to step in. As the sirens faded away and the police took Tyler away, the emergency services arrived quickly to take care of us. I sat there on the cold ground, my back against the bar's wall, as a paramedic bandaged a cut above my eye. It stung, but not as much as my arm, which turned out to be broken. My ribs throbbed each time I breathed. Despite the pain, I felt a huge relief, knowing the chaos was over. The bar was shut down for the night and later closed for a deeper investigation. The university didn't waste any time either. Tyler was suspended from the football team and had to face both legal and university disciplinary actions. Sitting there, watching the bar's lights turn off and the last of my teammates leave, I had a lot of time to think about everything that happened. It was clear how dangerous unchecked aggression could be, especially when mixed with something like steroids. I thought about how easily things could have turned even worse, and how important it is to handle our emotions and actions responsibly. As I healed over the next few weeks, I made a decision. I wanted to help prevent this kind of thing from happening again, not just at our school, but anywhere. I started working with the athletic department to set up programs focusing on mental health and substance abuse. We needed to educate everyone about the risks and provide support for those who might be struggling. This whole experience taught me a lot about integrity and self-control. I realized that being strong isn't just about physical power, but also about making choices that keep you and others safe. I'm still passionate about sports, but now I know there's more I can do off the field to help my teammates and friends. My name is Jake, and running at night has always been my way to unwind after long days filled with computers and code. I work in IT, so by the time I leave the office, it's usually pretty late. That's when I hit the trail, around midnight. There's this one trail I love. It's secluded and winds through a wooded area just on the edge of our town. At night, it's especially peaceful. Just me and the path and the night sounds. Tonight was no different, or so I thought as I laced up my sneakers and started my run. The air was cool and crisp, perfect for a good long run. The path under my feet was familiar, and all I could hear were my own footsteps echoing in the quiet. Everything was normal, just the way I liked it. But I had no idea that tonight's run would be different, that it would turn into something right out of a scary movie. As I settled into my rhythm, something odd caught my attention. At first, it sounded like an echo of my own footsteps bouncing off the trees. But the more I listened, the more I realized these weren't echoes at all. There was a distinct, rhythmic set of footsteps crunching the gravel behind me. Someone was following me. I tried to shake off the creeping unease, telling myself it was just another night runner or maybe an animal. So, I picked up my pace, pushing myself to run faster, hoping to leave behind whatever was trailing me. But the footsteps increased their speed too, matching mine perfectly. That sent a real chill down my spine. This was no coincidence. Someone was definitely following me. To be sure, I came up with a plan. I slowed down, pretending to need to tie my shoe, and as I bent down, I listened intently. The moment I stopped, the footsteps behind me stopped too. It was too sudden, too quiet. There was no mistaking it now. I was being followed, and whoever it was, they were doing it on purpose. Standing up slowly, I felt a surge of fear. It was time to get out of there, but I knew I had to be smart about it. I couldn't just run. I needed a plan. Without thinking twice, I turned sharply and sprinted off the path, diving into the thicker woods. Branches whipped against my face, and leaves crunched loudly under my feet as I pushed myself to run faster, fueled by pure adrenaline. I could barely see in the dim moonlight that filtered through the dense canopy above, but fear drove me forward. As I crashed through the underbrush, the chilling sound of rustling followed me. My follower was not only keeping pace, but seemed to be gaining on me. The noise of their movements through the trees was getting louder, closer. I was super panicked as I realized I wasn't losing them at all. They were catching up. Then disaster struck. My foot caught on a root, hidden under a layer of dead leaves, and I went down hard. The ground slammed into me, knocking the wind out of my chest. For a brief, terrifying moment, I lay there, disoriented, and I heard the footsteps of my pursuer draw even closer. My mind screamed at me to move, to get up. Scrambling to my feet, I ignored the pain shooting through my knee and plunged deeper into the forest, desperate to put any distance between myself and the threat. Just when I thought I couldn't run any further, my eyes caught a glimpse of something different ahead. A break in the dense trees, a hint of light. With the last bit of strength I had, I sprinted towards it, the sound of my pursuer's footsteps still hauntingly close behind me. The light grew brighter, and I realized it was the parking lot of a 24-hour gym, glowing like a beacon in the night. My legs felt like jelly, and my lungs burned, but I didn't stop until I burst out of the trees and into the brightly lit area, stumbling towards the safety of light and people. The footsteps behind me faded, swallowed by the darkness of the woods as I finally reached the sanctuary of the gym's parking lot. Gasping for air, I stumbled into the well-lit parking lot of the 24-hour gym. My legs were shaky, my breath heavy, and I felt like I could barely stand. I leaned over, hands on my knees, trying to catch my breath. Turning around, I glanced back at the dark edge of the woods I had just escaped from. There, I saw the dark figure of my follower. They stood at the boundary between the safety of the light and the danger of the dark forest. For a moment, our eyes locked, and then, as if deciding I wasn't worth the trouble in this well-lit, populated place, the figure turned and disappeared back into the darkness from where they had come. I felt such relief as I realized the presence of other people around the gym had probably scared them off. People were coming in and out of the gym, and their casual chatter and laughter felt like the most beautiful sounds. I knew I was safe now, and my knees almost gave out from the sheer relief of it all. I had made it out, I was okay, and that nightmare of a chase was finally over. Safe but shaken, I walked into the gym, grateful for the bright lights and the people around. I knew I had been too vulnerable out there alone on the trail. Now, standing here safe, I made up my mind to change my running schedule or find a buddy for those late-night runs. This scary night taught me to be more careful, even in places I thought I knew well. I was just thankful to be safe and decided that from now on, I wouldn't take those quiet paths for granted. Every morning, just as the city starts to wake up, I lace up my sneakers and hit the pavement as I head out for a run. It's my favorite part of the day. I'm Emily, by the way. I moved to this city not long ago for a new job in software development. The streets near my place are usually quiet, lined with small homes and the occasional park, perfect for someone like me who loves to run. But lately, those peaceful runs have felt different. The empty streets and quiet corners of the neighborhood that I once enjoyed now make me uneasy. There's a chill in the air that doesn't come from the autumn breeze. It feels like someone's watching me. This isn't just my imagination, and it's turning my morning routine into something I dread. It started subtly, almost too small to notice. A few weeks into my new routine, I saw a gray sedan parked along my usual running route. I didn't think much of it at first. Cars park on streets all the time. But then, I saw it again the next day, and the day after that, always in different spots, but always somewhere along my path. One morning, that same sedan sped up just as it passed me. The sudden roar of the engine made my heart jump. I glanced over and caught the briefest glimpse of the driver, his face shadowed and unreadable. Shaken, I cut my run short and headed home, trying to convince myself it was just a coincidence. The next day, I changed my route. I thought that would solve the problem, but it didn't. When I got home, tucked under my door, I found a note. It was just a plain piece of paper with a few words scribbled on it. I saw you change your path today. No name, no other clues. Whoever wrote that note was watching me closely, too closely. My sense of safety began to crumble. Every morning, the thrill of my run was overshadowed by fear, turning each corner into a potential surprise. I wasn't just running for exercise anymore. I was running with the unsettling feeling that I wasn't alone. One morning, I decided to run at a different time, hoping to shake the uneasy feeling that had taken over my routine. But as I stepped outside, there it was again. That gray sedan, parked right across the street from my house. My heart sank. It was clear now. This wasn't just about my running route. This person knew where I lived. The next day, something even more unsettling happened. I found a package at my doorstep. Inside was a new pair of running shoes, exactly like the ones I'd recently lost at the gym. Tucked inside one of the shoes was a note that read, "Better for running towards me." My hands trembled as I held it. This person wasn't just watching me from afar. They knew intimate details about my life. Things got worse. That evening when I came home from work, I noticed the back door was slightly open. I hadn't left it like that. Stepping inside, my breath caught in my throat. Spread out across the living room floor were dozens of photos of me running, taken from different angles and times. Someone had been following me for a long time, documenting my every move. The real terror struck late one night when I was jolted awake by a noise outside my bedroom window. Heart pounding, I crept to the window and peered out. There, in the faint glow of the streetlight, was a man holding a camera. Our eyes met, and a cold smile spread across his face. He started to pry the window open. Panicked, I backed away from the window, my mind racing. I knew I had to act fast. This was no longer just a feeling of being watched. It was an immediate threat. As the stalker worked to force the window open, I knew I had to do something. Remembering the advice from a neighbor and a security workshop I attended, I had rigged a homemade alarm system just in case. With shaking hands, I activated it. Suddenly, the quiet night erupted into loud sirens and flashing lights from the alarm. The stalker froze, caught off guard by the noise and light. His moment of hesitation was all I needed. I sprinted to the back door, slipped through, and ran as fast as I could down the street. I headed straight to a friend's house who lived nearby. I had called her earlier when I first felt uneasy about the noises, telling her I might need help. As I reached her house, panting and scared, she quickly let me in. Alerted by the alarm, other neighbors had come outside to see what was happening. Together, they approached my house just as the stalker was trying to escape, now thwarted by the attention he had attracted. My friend and the neighbors detained him, carefully keeping him at a distance until the police arrived, which wasn't long given the disturbance. The police took him into custody, and as they led him away, the weight of what had been terrorizing me for weeks finally lifted. I was safe, surrounded by friends and neighbors who had rushed to my aid. The relief was overwhelming, and in that moment, I realized just how much danger I had been in, and how fortunate I was to have such a supportive community around me. After that night, the man who had been stalking me was arrested and charged. The court issued a restraining order, and he underwent a psychological evaluation. I was safe, physically, but the fear I felt during those weeks left a deep mark on me. For a while, I couldn't bring myself to go on my morning runs, the very thing that used to start my day on such a positive note. Instead, I joined a local gym and started attending community safety workshops. As I reflect on everything that happened, I realize how crucial it is to be prepared and aware of our surroundings. But more than that, I learned the incredible strength of community. My friends and neighbors came together when I needed them the most, and it's their support that helped me through one of the darkest times in my life. A few months ago, something happened that I'll probably never forget. My name is Jake, and I was a senior in college, studying business. I've always been pretty ambitious, always on the lookout for any chance to make sure I have a good future. But being in college isn't cheap, and money was always tight. I went to this big old university known for being really competitive. It was the kind of place where everyone tried to outdo each other all the time. Toward the end of my final year, I got this weird email. It was an invitation to an exclusive final exam, held in the old engineering building that almost nobody used anymore. That building was creepy, big, quiet, and kind of falling apart. The email said that if I passed this exam, I'd be set for life with a guaranteed successful career. It sounded too good to be true, but I was desperate and curious. Little did I know, that decision would lead me into one of the scariest nights of my life. When I first got the email about the final exam, I thought maybe it was a joke or a mistake. But then I talked to some other students who got the same message. We were all curious and a bit excited. Maybe this was our big break. We met up outside the old engineering building on the night of the exam. It was dark, and the whole place looked even more run down at night, which made us all a bit nervous. Before we could even see the first question, they made us sign a bunch of papers. They were non-disclosure agreements and waivers, full of legal words that talked about potential risks and moral challenges. Signing those papers felt wrong, but the promise of a guaranteed future pushed us to go ahead. I tried to shake off the uneasy feeling creeping up my spine. Then came the first task. We were led into a dimly lit room filled with computers. They told us we needed to decrypt data from a database. It sounded straightforward until I started seeing the information on the screen. Names, addresses, personal details. It didn't take long to realize the data was about our own families. My heart dropped. What kind of exam was this? Using our family's private information felt way over the line. I looked around and saw the same realization dawning on other students' faces. We were all starting to question just what we'd gotten ourselves into. The next task really ramped up the fear. They separated us into different rooms, each one locked from the outside. Alone, I faced a computer flashing complex problems with a countdown timer ticking down. The silence of the room was broken by distant screams echoing through the walls. My heart raced. This was getting too real, too fast. The third task was even worse. I was led into a maze of rooms, each filled with different hazards, sharp objects dangling from the ceiling, floors that felt unstable, and chemicals that smelled dangerous. As I tried to navigate through, I scraped my arm on something sharp, and the cut stung sharply. It was clear, failing these tasks could mean serious injuries, or worse. But nothing prepared me for the fourth task. On a screen, I saw one of my classmates, trapped in a water-filling tank, panic clear on their face. The voice over the speaker chilled me to the bone. You can save them and lose points, or move on to secure your future. I stood frozen, the decision torturing me. How could I choose my success over someone's life? With a heavy heart, I hit the button to save them, hearing the lock click open in their room through the speaker. The final task brought me face to face with the person behind this nightmare, a professor who'd been fired for unethical experiments. He smiled coldly, explaining how this was all his study on desperation and morality under pressure. Standing there, bruised and shaken, I felt disgust and anger boiling inside me. This wasn't just a test of skills, it was a twisted game with our lives and consciences. After hearing the professor's twisted reasons, I knew we couldn't play his game any longer. Looking around, I saw the same determination in the eyes of my classmates. This was wrong, and it had to stop. We refused to complete the last task. Instead, we looked for any way to get out of that creepy building. Amidst the chaos, one of my friends remembered that the maintenance crew often left a master key in the utility room for emergencies. We quickly found the key and used it to unlock the main doors, bursting out into the cool night air. Just as we got out, the university's night security patrol was passing by. They saw us, the look of panic and urgency clear on our faces, and immediately sensed something was wrong. The security team sprang into action. They called for more help, and soon, several members of the university staff arrived. They listened to our story with growing horror and disbelief. Thanks to the quick thinking and bravery of my classmates and the timely intervention of the campus security, we escaped that nightmare. The university staff took over, promising to handle the situation and ensure that no one else would go through such an ordeal again. I felt a rush of gratitude, relieved that we had found our own way out and had been helped just in time by the very people who were supposed to protect us on campus. After everything calmed down, the university took action right away. They made a public statement denouncing the rogue professor's actions and offered counseling and support to all of us who were affected. They also sealed off the old engineering building where it all happened and started big discussions about how to better oversee what happens in their programs. Sitting in my dorm room later, I had a lot of time to think about what had happened. I realized how close I had come to giving up my values just for the chance of guaranteed success. It was a wake-up call about the dangers of wanting something so badly that you might do the wrong thing to get it. I learned a huge lesson about the importance of sticking to what's right, even when you're under pressure and feeling desperate. Despite the scary things that happened, I came out of it feeling stronger. I knew I never wanted to compromise my integrity again. Moving forward, I was more committed than ever to work hard and achieve my goals the right way, valuing honesty and hard work over any quick path to success. The whole experience taught me that the real test wasn't in that building, it's in how you choose to live your life every day.